John Hook's Newsmaker Saturday starts now.
Thanks for joining us on Newsmaker Saturday. Well, the votes are in, and it is a clean sweep for Donald Trump-backed Republicans. Kari Lake, governor; Blake Masters, U.S. Senate; Abe Hamadeh, attorney general candidate on the Republican side; Mark Fincham, secretary of state; several others. The question now is, how does all of this play with independent voters who, after all, make up the largest segment of Arizona's electorate? So to break it down, two of the best political minds I know in the state: Stan Barnes, founder and president of Copper State Communications, former state lawmaker on the left of your screen; Chuck Coughlin, founder of High Ground, worked with John McCain; Fife Symington, Grant Woods, chaired Governor Brewer's transition team. These guys are veterans of the political world. Thank you for being here.
Good to be here.
It's good to see you both.
Good to be here.
Let's start with Governor. Stan, you know Kari well. I know Kari well. This is a very interesting race because this is truly a newcomer with no experience in politics, no executive experience. How do you think this matchup with Katie Hobbs goes?
Yeah, I'd rather be Kari Lake than Katie Hobbs in the general election. I'll sum it up that way.
Why is that?
Because the energy is on her side. What she's pulled off, being outspent 10-1, coming in as a brand new person and being outspent 10-1 by a very effective Karen Taylor Robeson campaign, and yet still winning, proves what I think is the main point of the general election: that the energy among the electorate is to do something different than what we're doing.
And that crosses over to that independent bloc.
Yes,
of voters.
I think it does. I know you want to get there. I think the independent voter, which is really a person I consider mostly a disaffected Republican.
I agree with that. I think it's 60-40.
Yeah, it's a center-right kind of thing.
Yes.
That person wants to vote for something different, and it's going to be a nationalized state election with Joe Biden and Donald Trump being on the ballot, even though they're not on the ballot.
I agree with that. They want to vote for something different. I think unaffiliated voters tend to want to not participate in hard school partisan politics, hence the reason they've left that arena. There'll be about 24% of the electorate in the general. They are the swing part of the electorate. I believe they respond to messages about making government work for you. You know, having a quality teacher in your classroom, having a good principal running your school, delivering on the state's water challenges. I think they look for competency. And I think the opportunity here, back to the narrative, is I think what the Democrats are going to do, and probably what they should do, is, are we putting Trump in charge of the state? Is that what's going to happen? We're going to put people in charge that supported the insurrection and don't support your vote. And I think the conflicting emotions there, I think, and I've not seen any unaffiliated candidates since 2016 that are Trumpers attract unaffiliated voters. The unaffiliated voters left. They went for Sinema and Ducey in that gubernatorial cycle, and they went for Kelly and Biden in the last cycle. I think Trump is like a kryptonite to a unaffiliated voter.
Can this be mended when Kari Lake has talked about do nothing Ducey? She talks about him being an unpopular governor, but really the polling he does pretty well. Yeah. He handled the pandemic probably in the top tier of governors in the country, not going too far on shutdowns, trying to keep things operating. Can that be repaired? Can that relationship with the traditional Republicans be repaired?
I think it can, and here's why. The matrix of old was to run to the right, tack to the center. Run to the right during the primary, tack to the center in the general. And I think that's all gone with the phenomenon fever we've got of this America First thing, plus social media, which allows free communication with your audience. Kari ran the table on social media compared to her opponent. Somehow almost 700,000 followers versus 11,000.
Where's Katie Hobbs in that world?
She's much smaller than Kari Lake.
Single A ball.
Yeah, single A ball. Thank you. I think the old matrix of mend fences is not as applicable. It used to be the Republican candidate would moderate themselves to go attract money from the country club class or the Republican Party so they could go win a general election by buying television ads. That's gone. And there's a new matrix. If you ask Kerry, if she were sitting here in this old studio of hers, I think what she'd say is there is a fever and a phenomenon and a happening that cuts across party lines. I think that's the seminal question of this general election: is how big is this America First thing?
And what does Katie Hobbs have to do?
Well, she's got to turn out votes. I mean, Democrats were underperformed in the primary. They didn't really have a lot of participation or a little competitive
But actually,
races.
Katie Hobbs in the total got more votes than Kerry Lake
She did in the total, but overall Democratic turnout was not what it should have been. Overall primary turnout was in the 33%.
Okay, so this is lack of enthusiasm for the product?
So now you got to go out, and now you got to make sure your base of Democratic voters turns out, plus your unaffiliated base of voters turns out for you. And so it's a balancing tightrope walk. I don't share Stan's opinion that the fever that has infected the Republican side of the swamp is infected the other side of the anti-fever may have affected them. And so I'm curious as to see how people motivate people to get out and vote.
How big does the abortion issue loom over all of these races, and particularly governor that would have to either veto or support whatever the legislature might craft if they want to craft something else?
We talked about this a little bit the other night. If Democrats go their proclivity way and say, unfettered right to, that's a loser. That's not a great place to be. I think you'd want to shape it around the narrative stories of individual females. There's an ad out already today that comes from, whose campaign? It was.
I think it's the Hobbs campaign. It's a Democratic.
Yeah, it's a Hobbs campaign with a narrative of pointing to, I know it's Blake Masters talking about, it's the Senate race, talking about Blake Masters, and it's a woman who had an ectopic pregnancy, and she said, I would have died. And I'm a mom of 3 kids, and he's not going to hear to be. So they're going to. The
I'm not sure actually under the law an ectopic pregnancy falls under this.
That doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. This is campaigning, John. Come on.
I guess true.
But to your point, I think that the Democratic side of the aisle does believe it's an issue, and they're already leading with it. That's the point.
Well,
and
Kansas showed that there is a sentiment
and women
out there.
voters are there on that issue.
Okay, let's talk about the U.S. Senate race. Blake Masters wins, another Trump-backed candidate. He wins easily. By the way, the polling was abysmal leading up to this. There were 2 polls that were on the mark, Emerson and Karen Taylor Robson's internal, right, that were on the mark.
I think High Ground was pretty close about 8 days ago.
I don't know about
Talking to a pollster.
but this stuff had that as a runaway.
Right.
They did get the Masters race pretty close. Masters winning it pretty easily.
Yeah.
Against Mark Kelly. Stan?
Well, as a Republican, I think Masters is the weakest candidate of the lineup that we could have put up against Mark Kelly. I think Mark Kelly's vulnerable, given he owns the Biden problems in Washington. There's so much to exploit there. But we're putting up a guy that I think is easily exploitable and easily attackable, and I have very low expectations.
Why is that? Just two?
I think it's a combination of things, and one of them is his youth and relative inexperience in all of this. And another is his sugar daddy, if you'd let me say that, is that Peter Thiel is the main source of all his funds. And people don't like somebody that is living on someone else's money, even in politics. So I think and the likability factor, which I give Kerry Lake a great deal of benefit, I think plays to Mark Kelly's benefit. Mark Kelly's a very likable guy, and his ads and his black t-shirt make him look like one of us. I don't know if you make Blake Masters look like that likable
The astronaut
guy.
Thing is...
An astronaut and Gabby Giffords thing doesn't hurt a bit.
No.
Yeah, no, I think the narrative line that Blake will use against Kelly is going to be tying him to Joe Biden, tying him to the failed economy, tying him to the failed immigration policies, tying him. It's going to be a highly negative campaign. First ad he came out with, trying to warm him up with his wife a little bit, back to Stan's point, which is probably smart. But the narrative, I think, we'll hear on from out, because I agree with Stan. Having him try to move towards any place other than where he's at is going to be very difficult.
I want to roll tape 16 for a minute. Barry Goldwater. I still feel, this is just a personal aside, I still feel that independent streak in Arizona voters still runs deep. Am I wrong to assume that a lot of folks on the Republican side do not necessarily want their candidates taking marching orders from somebody, I don't care who it is, that they want these people to be somewhat independent in their line of thinking? In other words, if you're lockstep with Trump, is that a turnoff?
Well, look at Kirsten. Kirsten's got 40% approval numbers amongst Republicans. She's running that line to the extreme, and she's fairly popular with Republicans. She's not with her own party. But that's the spirit, I think, of what Arizonans want to send to Washington, is people who vote their conscience, vote what they think is the right thing to do. And the history of the state, John, is dependent upon somebody understanding Arizona. Our relationships as a state, from the Salt River Project to the CAP to the military bases to the Palo Verde nuclear generation. I mean, they're all massively important relationships. And Masters falls out of that field of being one of these people that understands that.
Stan, do you think that Barry Goldwater streak still runs here?
Very much. I use that analogy all the time. I think it's a very real thing in Arizona. It's one reason Sinema won, and it's exemplified in Mark Kelly running away from the Democratic Party. It's not just the Mark Kelly.
He votes with Biden
that's
almost all the time.
Almost inside baseball. And the Republicans are going to make sure, and they had a very effective ad that's run recently that's animated with him and flowers. They're going to marry Mark Kelly to Joe Biden. That's a very effective thing to do. Mark Kelly's going to run the Sinema play, which is to run as far away from the Democratic Party as possible. And so is Hobbs. Hobbs is going to run a campaign like Mark Kelly. She is already talking about being an independent person, because Democratic politics are out at the moment, and Republican politics.
So in a state like Arizona, it's a tough sell.
Yes, this is a center-right state.
Okay, so why would that not apply to Kari Lake if she's running lockstep with Donald Trump?
No, to your earlier point, you could like Donald Trump's. You could like Donald Trump, but you don't want Donald Trump to own your candidate. That's a fair point, and the Lake campaign needs to be keenly aware of that.
Can she start to create some distance between?
I don't know that she...
Does she want to?
She can. I don't know that she wants to. I really don't know, but she's had success with it so far, and that's hard to argue with.
I think her maverickism is the fact that she owns that space. She's hard in on how disruptive, how polluted the current political environment is. And that's how she narrates
that. May
that.
even transcend Trump.
I like that point. This morning I was buying tires from my neighbor who owns a tire store. Bill McChuck in there, and he says that something right on the point Chuck just made, that what Kari's doing is playing into, a lot of people are dissatisfied with the system. And when she takes the sledgehammer to the whole thing, it feels good. And that's
and the media freaks out, but maybe the public loves it.
Yeah.
Well, I had my own story. Like Bass, the cattleman, called me the other day. His mom was working a polling place in Buckeye, and two Hispanic ranch hands come walking in. They ask for their ballot. They get their ballot. They go to the polling place, and they go, "Hey, where's Katie? Where's Kari Lake? I want to vote for Kari Lake." And they go, "You're a Democrat. You requested the Democratic ballot."
There you go.
So it's there.
Okay,
It's
we're
there.
good. We got to take a break. When we come back, we're going to hit. What do we have left? Secretary of State, a couple other races, and then AG, and then the congressional races. We've got 4 of them that are up for grabs. Back in a minute on Newsmaker Saturday. Stan Barnes, Chuck Coughlin. Back on Newsmaker Saturday, Stan Barnes, Chuck Coughlin, 2 of the great political minds in the state. They've been around a long time. They've done a lot of stuff. They know this stuff. Okay, let's start with Secretary of State. This is interesting. Fincham and we'll put it up on the screen. Fincham and Chris Mays.
I don't know how Mark wins this race. I don't think it's possible. I mean, if you parade out his anti-early voting, his record of telling people he will overturn and decertify the last election, his record of saying, I want to put the legislature in charge of elections and I will not. This office is about your vote. It's about elections. And Adrian's a good enough candidate. He was the Maricopa County Recorder, barely lost to Stephen Richer the last time in Maricopa. I think Adrian's narrative, because you can hold it right on that issue. No inflation in this. There's nothing else going on. It's about your vote.
What do you think, Stan?
Well, I think this race might even be a better political science experiment than the Hobbs-Lake race, because you've got the pure Trump election position in Mark Fincham to the extreme, and you have Mr. Fontes, who was in charge of the election that is allegedly stolen. I mean, that's like right out of a romance
It
novel.
was stolen, but he still got he got thrown out.
But he lost, so he messed that part up. But I mean, Chuck's making a good point that if the cerebral voter, I think, is with Fontes, but as I say, people vote with their heart and not their head. This is going to be a nationalized election. Mr. Fontes is going to have a lot of money.
But a majority of Arizona's electorate doesn't believe the election was stolen. If that's what the election's about.
This is the main point. This is what the general election is going to prove, whether or not, how big is the America First phenomenon?
Okay.
How big? And
Fair enough.
That's where it plays out.
Let's go to Attorney General. Abe Hamadeh, Chris Mays. What do you think? Abe Hamadeh came out of nowhere.
Really, he came out of absolutely nowhere.
I have a question about this.
Been a lawyer for 7 years.
Has either of them ever? I know Hamadeh has tried a few cases. Has Chris Mays ever tried a case in court? She is a lawyer.
I'm sure she has. She's taught law at ASU. She has a lawyer. I'm sure she's tried cases.
Okay, because I was going to. I'm not
sure about that.
I mean, I know Chris well, and I don't think
civil litigation. Yeah.
Really, I don't know, but it doesn't matter.
Well, I mean, these are people who end up often arguing before the Supreme Court. You're Attorney General.
It's more rare than normal, I think, for the Attorney General.
Grant Woods did it.
Yeah, that's because Bernavich was a showboat. I mean,
Bernavich did it too.
Bernavich did it too
because he's running for the Senate.
Here's the takedown on this. I mean, if it's on credentials alone, Chris walks away with this race. I mean, Hamadeh's been a lawyer for 7 years. 2.5 of that, I think he was in the U.S. Army Reserves, and he's got no legal record whatsoever. Chris has been a corporation commissioner, statewide corporation commissioner, was a legal scholar, taught law at ASU, has been an activist on policy stuff.
A journalist, by the way.
Her biggest challenge.
Journalist with the Republicans.
Positive or negative?
Political reporter.
Her biggest challenge is her anti-carbon positions that have gone to the extreme. She got tied up in the ballot initiative a couple years ago that got creamed. And so people are going to, Hamadeh would be well suited to remind people of that.
There is also the natural dynamic of this state liking Republican AGs. Tough on crime AGs.
That's
and
true.
Hamadeh has the military background, which gets a lot of people immediately on their side.
I have never seen so many veterans in a political race.
They're
in
winning.
that primary,
They
were all over the place,
Yes.
which is really interesting.
And they're doing well, and he's one of them.
Okay, let's go to education. Tom Horn, Hoffman. That seems to be a heavy lift for Tom Horn. Am I wrong?
You're wrong.
Wow.
You're wrong. This is a resurrection of a once dead political career. I hate to tell you in front of your live audience.
Well, no, here's the thing that's interesting about that. I was thinking about it today. There are a lot of people here who don't know the history of Tom Horn.
Absolutely true. Absolutely true. And Horn is a Republican carrying the banner of anti-wokeness in this campaign. And watch Kathy try to deal with that. It's not a good play to be on the CRT side of the equation.
So you guys are in disagreement on this one.
I thought Kathy's done a really good job as the current superintendent of public instruction. I believe he's right. She's on the back end of a bad ballot, of a troublesome cycle for Democrats, potentially troublesome cycle. But I think she's going to have enough gas given Tom's record and Tom's narrowness of his platform, because people actually do care about public education.
I keep hearing this about bad year for Democrats, but it seems like when you get closer to the election, everybody goes back to their default position.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. I think the Democrats are hoping that between now and October, that inflation gets better under control, that there's a better handle on some of these issues. They'll pass the legislation, the reconciliation bill. They'll have a lot to talk about there. And I think they'll feel better by the time October comes around.
Let's look at a couple of congressional races. Let's take District 1 right out of the gate. That district really changed for David Schweikert. Jevin Hodge, don't know a lot about him. Any handicapping on this race? This is now not as Republican as this district once was.
Jevin barely lost a supervisor race to Jack Sellers in the last cycle in that eastern part of Mesa, Mesa and Tempe. The district moves a little bit farther up there. I think David's going to be fine, though. I do. I think he'll be fine in this race.
Yeah, there's a lot of wind at the back of Republicans running for Congress. Democrats run it now, and no one's happy with what's going on in Congress. What's Jevin going to run on? Bringing more Democrats to Congress? That's not a winning hand right now.
Okay. Well, speaking of that, let's go to District 2. Tom O'Halloran. This district was once, I think, +7. Well, it was pretty close. Republican, Democrat, a little bit of a Democratic edge, I
Yes.
think. And now it's +15.
Yes.
Republican. This is a bad district for him to be in, although he knows that district. He's been in that district a long time. Can he beat the newcomer, Eli Crane, who was Trump endorsed?
I think it's going to be really, really hard. Tom's probably the most vulnerable Democrat in Arizona. And I would be surprised if he pulls it off. Not shocked, but surprised. Crane is, I believe, a war veteran, has military experience. And as the tide of this election goes, I believe so does that race.
Okay, let's go District 4. This is parts of Tempe, Mesa, Chandler. This is also a possible flip with Greg Stanton. It favors Democrats by 1 percentage point. Kelly Cooper, again, kind of an unknown. Any thoughts on this race?
Yeah, Kelly Cooper surprised some of us supposedly smart chattering class because we all thought this other person,
Exactly.
Tanya Wheelis, was going to win.
Yes.
But Cooper is a military veteran as well. He's going to portray that loud and clear. And I think Stanton is more vulnerable than perhaps Chuck does. And again, I think it's part of this beehive of what Congress has held in such contempt that to be an incumbent Democrat in a swing district is a very vulnerable position.
So that district reminds me of the old District 9 that was held by Sinema from ever, and that the only Republican ever to win in that district was McCain. And it's mostly East Mesa, Tempe, Ahwatukee, which is Phoenix, and that's pretty much it. It's a fairly moderate swing district. My instinct is Greg will survive, and that district over time will continue to trend in that direction.
Okay, the last one is District 6. This is Ann Kirkpatrick retiring.
Yeah.
I mean, that's another one that they consider this could be a Republican flip. And these are two newcomers.
I sure do. Juan Ciscomani is one heck of a candidate. Very good. Big fundraiser, a Latino. And that
part of the Ducey
part
crowd.
of the Ducey and Army. And Kirsten Engel happens to be one of the nicest human beings ever served in the Arizona legislature, but that's not going to translate to an election win.
Well, and her record's pretty left of center.
Yes.
And the district is not that.
Where is she on border issues? Since that's a border, you're getting.
And that goes into the Democratic-Republican divide. People are going to trust Republicans more on that issue. And that district has a lot of border issues, all down Douglas, all along the border down there. I sense, as Stan does, that Juan will win that race.
Let's roll tape number 15. What's happened to the love affair that this state had with John McCain?
Are we waiting for a tape? Oh, there it is. We're talking over the tape. Well, I know I speak for Chuck when I say we both love John McCain, and I'm sorry he's gone. Having said that, his moment of politic has passed, and we're in a new moment, whether you or I like it or not. This, in any detached analysis, that kind of politic is behind us, and there is a new politic, and things change, and we're in a new
Kirsten Sinema reviving some of this?
Well, Kirsten is, and we're going to see the narrative on the left talking about to the Republicans who believe, as the three of us do, that there's a genuinely good man there, that they'll narrate to that narrative and that history of his service. And that's where the opening comes for a Democrat to speak to McCain voters. They're still there. I'm still one of them.
We got to take a break.
Yeah.
We got to take a break. Back in a second on Newsmaker Saturday. Thanks for joining us on Newsmaker Saturday. As we take a wide shot here at the end, I want to thank Stan Barnes and Chuck Coughlin. Great job with the analysis, and we'll have you back. Can we do that? Deal?
Yes,
There'll be some things to talk about.
Yeah, I guess.
There always are. Thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it. This program has done extremely well in this time slot, and we appreciate your loyalty. We'll see you next week on Newsmaker Saturday.